And let's go ahead and get kicked off, everybody. So thank you all for joining us today at Coffee, Tea, and AdOps, where we're going to talk about monetization of your inventory and different ways you can go ahead and approach it. My name is Melissa Chapman, and I head up community and operations for Beeler.Tech. I actually have been in the publisher, ad, and revenue space for over 25 years. And I've known Craig a long time. And in fact, we worked together. OAO helped us out in one of my past lives. So Beeler.Tech, where I've been for about 5 years now. If you guys aren't familiar, I assume most of you are, but just in case, right? We're really a community company where we bring together advertising and revenue professionals and give you the space to create conversations, to learn, and make your life and business better and easier. So thank you for joining us. So a couple quick housekeeping things before we get in. Let's talk about the agenda real quick. We are going to, today we're talking about how you manage your inventory and monetize that advertising opportunity, right? So there's a few different ways. So we're going to kind of set the stage. Then we're going to talk about whether you manage that in-house, whether you delegate that out, or maybe you have some sort of a combo. I encourage you to ask questions throughout. We will have a Q&A portion after we get through a fireside chat here. Please use the Q&A tool to do that. It makes it a little bit easier to manage the questions. The chat can get to be a little much when there's a lot of people on, as there is today. So that would be greatly appreciated. And yeah, I think that's it. So gentlemen, I'd like to have you introduce yourselves. Travis, would you mind kicking us off?
Not at all. Hey, everybody. My name is Travis Hare. I head up sales and biz dev here at OAO. I've been here quite some time now, bounced around in many different roles. I'm very eager to see where this conversation takes us today. Looking forward to maybe seeing some of your questions and some of your feedback.
And I'm Michael Edwards. I lead the accounts team at OAO, and I work closely with Travis and Craig on sales, marketing, partnership, and product management. I've been at OAO and in AdOps for about 15 years. And just like Travis, I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with everyone.
Thanks.
All right.
Craig.
Hi, everyone. I'm Craig, president, founder of OAO. I'm fighting a flu bug thing, so my role is going to be a little different. I'm not going to be talking as much. And I'm going to start with a little background on the company and then come back again at the end for Q&A and spare you all the coughing that you'll have to listen to. I've been in the industry since '96, almost around when it started. My first job was trafficking ads to run on AOL sites at a magazine company. Fast forward to 2003, AdOps was getting more and more complicated and complex, and companies were reaching out for assistance. So the idea of OAO was born. We opened our doors that October. So October of 2003, 21 years plus later, we've now grown into a company that started off providing traditional ad trafficking, reporting, and whatnot kind of services to now offering full stack AdOps to firms. Like many startups back then, it was the out of the apartment kind of story. And since then, we've grown to 4 offices across the US. And I'm actually calling you today from Guatemala, as we're in the process of expanding our reach from the US and Canada into LATAM. Our mission has always been to be the premier white glove ad operations services and solutions provider for digital publishers. And that means continually expanding on our offering to ensure we're able to provide that full stack for publishers. I'm not going to dig in on our entire stack now. If you want to learn more, our full roster of services listed on the website, adops.com. And with that, I made it through the intro without any coughing. Yes. We're looking forward to talking about managing and delegating, managing versus delegating the monetization of your inventory. Thank you for attending. And Melissa and team, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the background there. So let's go ahead and set our stage a little bit, right? So there's a lot of different ways to come at this, right? Whether you're starting with the site content you have, or whether you're thinking about the ad tech that you already have in place or we're planning to have in place, or whether you want to start with the internal constraints you have, it does not matter. right? But there's a lot of considerations for how you run your ad business and which direction you want to go. OAO, as Craig mentioned, has been around for 21 years. These guys have been doing this for a whole long time, right? Hundreds of customers, lots of different types of customers with different platforms. So I'm excited to get some expertise from Mike and Travis to hear more. So let's dig in. So before we get into specifically managed or delegated for the way you handle your monetization, like what are some of the high level considerations that publishers should have in mind, especially if they haven't made the call yet? Travis, would you mind kicking us off there?
Not at all. I think at a high level, I would say it probably helps to know where you sit in the publishing landscape and how well equipped you are, I would say. Are you a local legacy news publisher that has a simple IAB display integration on your site with a couple million impressions a month, or are you a tech savvy video game streaming platform that does 1 billion CTV views every month? You're always going to be assessing how much revenue you can make with the ad inventory at your disposal. But it's also really good to know what sort of resources you have internally to go out there and attack, that monetization.
Got it. Thank you. So when a publisher is thinking about their unique audience and what makes them special in the world, whether that's audience or the content or whatever they've got going on, right? What are some of the factors that should go into their decision making as they're going into this process?
A lot of publishers are quite different, depending on the site content, the technologies at play. I think the biggest contributing factor there is probably, the overall traffic numbers. I think for anybody who's been in this business for more than a few minutes, is well aware that, I think the most frequently asked question, of publishers and from technology partners is how much traffic do you have on your site? How effectively can you monetize the inventory that you do have is another big part of it. But traffic is really going to play, I think, the biggest factor into overall, monetization performance. There are things you can do to bolster that performance, with your ad density, putting more ad units on your pages can certainly generate more revenue, but then you need to balance your UX and your, actual with the ad density. You don't want your customers feeling like they're an MFA site or anything. And then the types of ad units, of course, display versus video versus audio, expanding rich media, custom wallpapers. There are a lot of different factors that can go into it, but overall, I would say the biggest factor is certainly, traffic volumes.
And I think for this conversation, we're really going to stick to kind of owned and operated, right? We could also talk about audience extension and that sort of thing. That's for another conversation and another coffee and tea at another time. So lots of considerations. I know this is a hard question, but is there a playbook that you guys use to help publishers figure this stuff out?
It'd be nice if there was.
It's $1 million question, right?
Yeah. I don't think there's necessarily a one size fits all playbook. Publishers are fairly unique, depending on their business and their sales requirements. That said, I think there are some best practices that they can follow. I would certainly recommend staying flexible and adaptable so you can take advantage of, new tech, new monetization opportunities that are in the space, staying organized. It's very easy for publishers, to fall into a trap of having an unmanageable ad network as they add more and more technologies, to their stack. And then, I would say publishers often find themselves, stretched a little thin as they try and tackle every single piece internally. There are other technology partners or operational partners in the space that can make your lives a lot easier as they might specialize in one area and have more resources than you might, in any given focus.
Yeah, and while there might not be one playbook for all publishers, depending on your vertical, we might have some experience with your specific type of publisher. Whether you're a retail media publisher that's focused on, sales attribution, or you're a sports publisher or a streaming publisher focused on CTV, We do have sort of playbooks for each individual instance, right? Where there might not be one broader one for the entire industry. So depending on what your line of business is, there's definitely some solutions that have already been put in place and that work.
Well, and it makes sense that we don't need a playbook for all publishers across all types, right? Because they're not all types, they're all individual types. Maybe they have sites with multiple. So I appreciate that. All right. So we're going to talk about, as mentioned at the top of the hour, right? We're going to talk about if you choose to manage your inventory, things to consider. What does that look like? What does that actually mean? What if you're delegating that out to a partner? Who, what are the good publishers? What's a good fit for that? And then we'll talk a little bit about the hybrid and what you think publishers should be looking for and keeping in mind for all three of these. So let's start out with managed. The $1 million question, what does it actually mean when you say you manage your ad inventory or your monetization?
Good question. At the very least, I'd say it probably means that you're directing the technical, operational, and monetization strategies for that inventory. So actually like conceptualizing the ad offering, what is it going to look like? Putting the different technology partnerships in place that you need to support that ad offering. And then managing the deployment of those technologies and the ongoing upkeep, from a dev perspective, selling and managing, the actual ad campaigns, the operational end of it, the trafficking, the reporting, the programmatic monetization. I would say that's essentially managing as a whole. There are different ways to get that done, but yeah, that's how I think I would probably best describe managing your own inventory.
Yeah, regardless of whether you're doing the work yourself or you're working with partners to do the work, essentially you're in the driver's seat, right? You're making all the decisions, the strategies, the tactics, etc., and whatever resources you have are rolling those out.
Got it. That makes sense. So where do you recommend a publisher start?
I'm going to play off what Mike just said about resources. I think that's probably the first place I would start. Do a resource check internally. As a publisher, what skills and person power do I have in-house, to manage these things? Can I handle all the tech deployment? Can I handle all the operational upkeep? Or do I need to look, for outside assistance? Publisher can still manage their own ad stack and drive all the strategy, but then outsource different pieces of that puzzle, whether it's the tech or the operations or the reporting, whatever it might be. There are, again, many ways to get that done. But yeah, I would say a resource check is probably the first thing you should do.
One thing that maybe isn't always front of mind when you're talking about resources and the technologies and the operations and all that is outside partner management as well. For every piece of tech and every group that you're working with, there's going to be someone that has to manage that relationship both on the business end and on the operational end too. So I wouldn't leave that one out when considering what types of resources you have.
Yeah, that's a great call out. And I've seen publishers that do choose to utilize partners, but they definitely want to have somebody in-house, right? That's really owning that to maximize that relationship, which I think is important.
Yeah.
All right. So you've got your resources, you kind of assess what you've got there. Is there a place in tech you start, or do you just kind of like, it just feels like there's a lot? And I'm curious, I know where I might start, but I'm curious where you guys would recommend starting.
I would probably start with your ad server selection, depending on what type of ad you're going to be running. Are you doing mostly audio content, mostly video content, display? Is it going to be a mix of both or all of the above? Newsletters, taking into consideration all the different types of content. It definitely behooves you to find an ad server that's going to work well across multiple pieces of content, if possible. Some publishers do like to have one ad server for one type of content, another ad server for another. That adds a whole layer of operational challenge. But yeah, I'd certainly say starting with your ad server selection is a great place. It may be one size fits all, it may not.
Yeah, I mean, the ad server is like the foundation of your whole operation, typically. And so making sure that it works well with all of your goals, but also all of your other technologies is going to be the first place I'd start.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting what you said, Travis, right? Because there's kind of a philosophical difference about, do you want to specialize and have a tool that's very specialty, but then you got to deal with the integration of all the tools? Or do you
Yep.
want to have one tool that kind of covers everything and may not be quite as specialized, right? And I don't know that there's a right or
Yeah.
wrong answer, but there's things to think through there.
Yeah, because that can touch on, other facets of your business. If you've got one ad server, do you have your pricing and planning team plugged into it? Do you have your invoicing and all the different areas of your business? It might double the efforts, not just on the operational side that I think all of us here today are familiar with, but some of the business aspects, that you might not even be thinking about.
Got it. So you guys deal with a lot of different kinds of publishers, some of them very experienced. Where have you found that even some of the most experienced publishers can use a little bit of help?
Good question. We do work with a lot of established publishers who come to us, for assistance in tagging and taxonomy, whether it's a decades old network, that has been shifted around over the years, or new partner acquisitions, or even, a savvy advertiser coming to them wanting to run a campaign that they can't quite support based on their existing structure. I think in a lot of cases, we do work with established publishers like that, so we can kind of help them sort of reset and establish them, with a certain amount of flexibility and maneuverability when it comes to ad stack.
Yeah, and I think it's beyond just the initial setup, which oftentimes has happened years ago or not at all yet. As time goes on, kind of reassessing and evaluating that to make sure you're staying current with your offering and your needs, and that you're not kind of building on more complications onto an outdated version of what worked years ago. So tagging and taxonomy is I'd say one of the biggest things we consult on. Also, as things come up in the industry, in recent years, privacy and consent and cookie management and all these types of things kind of roll up into that, but also can be its own unique ask that I think has been pretty popular in the last couple of years here, for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like, so when you talk about taxonomy, and maybe you said this, but I think you always have to think about the stuff you're going to pull out of it too, not just taxonomy, but your product catalog actually is what I should have said, right? Like, I feel like as a publisher, I definitely had seen mine in some cases. It grows, and not only does it go over here, right, but it just gets too big, and there's things that your team just isn't selling anymore, or whoever your sales resources are. So anyway,
the classic ad unit for every slot, or maybe you don't have the right tagging parameters to exclude an ad that's running on a certain section. Things like that can be a bear if you're not keeping updated
too.
Right.
Exactly. Like what the industry expects, and then what your customers expect, and what you need to be able to do to support that. Got it. Okay. So we've thought about our staff, we've thought about our our serving. What's kind of next on the list? And I realize you could go a number of different ways, but give me 2 or 3 of the kind of next areas.
I would say, the monetization strategy. Are you going to be looking to sell all this inventory directly? Are you going to be filling it programmatically? Is it going to be a mix of the two? I certainly recommend to pretty much every publisher I speak with to sell as much of the inventory as they can. Not every publisher has a salesperson or a sales staff, but in a lot of cases, those publishers may be approached by advertisers, maybe something falls in their lap. Absolutely try and close as many direct deals as you can. It's going to give you, the best CPMs that you'll likely see. And you don't want to turn away any additional revenue that you can make. But yeah, I would certainly focus on the monetization strategy overall, and then what capacity you have to support that monetization strategy, whether it's in-house or outsourced.
Right. And that includes not only the sales team and sales assistants and all of that, but also the day-to-day operations, the development resources, all of those things that kind of work in cooperation for the fulfillment of whatever is being sold.
Right. And all the tools that go along with that. Got it.
So
talk to me. So many tools. So speaking of, talk to me a little bit about kind of the next level tools, because we've talked about some of what I would consider building blocks right? And what's some of the other stuff that maybe not every publisher needs, but it
There are a
many
lot
do.
of additional tools everywhere you turn. I think one of the main ones is helping with in terms of like your operations and integrations across the, the organization is an order management platform. Once publishers reach a certain scale, or they have some specific needs that maybe the ad server can't cover because that's not its primary focus, I find that a lot of publishers start looking to see what order management platforms might do for them, and whether that's helping with forecasting and sell through, or defining some very complicated sales packages, or even integrating with other internal systems, your sales managers and things like that, or insulating your staff, right? Having them learn one interface instead of many. Order management systems tend to be the next level to handle some tasks that maybe the ad server wasn't designed to.
Yeah, that's definitely a big one. What might seem innocuous, reporting is kind of a big deal. If you're selling your inventory directly, do you need first and third party reporting? If you're filling it programmatically, do you have a platform that can report on all of your programmatic revenue across all of your partners? That's a big one. One layer of tech that's seen a slight resurgence as of late, which I kind of like as a sales guy, and that's the self-serve solutions that are out there. If you're a national publisher and you've got a very large market and a lot of users, maybe you have a high minimum spend to speak to your sales team, but there might be an auto group out of Minneapolis that might want to spend $10,000 or $20,000, and maybe not the 50 or 100 that it might take to actually work with your sales team. That gives them an opportunity to actually purchase inventory directly on your site and across your inventory. Maybe that auto group doesn't have access to a TSP and a marketing team to go out and buy that programmatically, but they may be a fan of your content. If they're on your site and they see the option to advertise here, that could be kind of neat. A good way to capture incremental revenue.
Yeah, there's a few, alongside self-serve, what's I think becoming more valuable lately is contextualization tools. With where everything's going with privacy and consent, DMPs are more important than ever to layering in first-party data in an efficient way. And those are just like the ad serving aspect of things. There's obviously some technical things, like you might have your primary ad server, but if you have very technical and high-level ad products, you might need a secondary server. With video and live streaming, you'll need a video player, maybe a Stitcher, things like that. So tons of different add-ons to the base ad server that you'll have to manage yourself, or have someone manage for you under your direction, under a managed approach.
Lots of tools.
Lots of tools.
Okay.
So many tools.
Yeah, lots. I know I was thinking like, were there others that the one that I wanted to go back to, I mean, and Shai, I saw your note there, but Travis, I think it's so important that we do kind of minimize a little bit, like, oh, it's just reporting, everything should work. But the fact is, reporting can make and break you in this business, right? Like, and having good tools that serve your needs and the needs of your clients are really important. And you mentioned, whether that's direct or programmatic. So I want to pivot a little bit to just talk, about if you guys can share what are some of the key considerations for programmatic. So in my past lives, I was largely a direct sales gal, and then programmatic got more and more complicated in the last 10 years. And so like, what are some of the key handful of things a publisher should keep their eye out for, or eye on, I should say?
That's a loaded question. There are so many factors.
Yeah,
when it comes to programmatic, and we could spend hours and hours and hours talking about programmatic and not even scratch the surface. To your point, programmatic has evolved. It's becoming increasingly technical, and it's leaps and bounds from where it was, 5 or 10 years ago. There are a lot of moving pieces. When it comes to managing your own programmatic stack, I think it certainly means being flexible and adapting to new and emerging technologies in the space. What was just an ad network 10 years ago is now AdX and open bidding and pre-bid server, Amazon TAM, different wrapping solutions that sort of encompass all of those technologies into one, that offer traffic shaping and dynamic flooring. And there are so many factors to consider. Having that expertise either in-house or outsourced, I think, is a very good idea. to Mike's point about managing, even if you're directing those resources, having that aspect covered is going to be a very big part about managing your inventory as well.
Yeah, there's three main things with this that I see that I also see in just general AdOps, right? It's like managing the monetization itself. Like someone has to be there to make sure it's going well, whether that's a human or team of humans or AI for that matter. Something has to manage the optimization management day to day of that sort of thing. Maybe not as feverishly as a direct sale, but certainly has to keep an eye on things, right? Then there's, like Travis said, all the different demand channels and so many different integrations, starting with your ad server, obviously some pre-bid and that sort of thing. But again, I said this earlier with another point we were making, but also partner management. You need those demand partners, and you need to be able to evaluate them and pick the best ones for your particular industry. So those three things I think are really where I'd start and where everything comes from when considering and standing up a programmatic effort.
Yeah,
And I
and
would
to your
say,
point about industry, Mike, I mean, there are, certain programmatic partners that specialize in certain verticals, whether it's entertainment, sports, news, et cetera, finding the right partners that fit your content is going to be a key component of it as well.
thank you very much for that one. Yeah, and do you find that for with those partners, I feel like you have to keep an eye on them too. And I don't mean an eye on, but monitor to make sure that this is the right partner mix for you ongoing, right? As the business kind of changes and moves over time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know at least for the publishers that work, we're constantly monitoring the performance of the individual partners in the stack, seeing who we need to send more traffic to potentially, et cetera. And periodically evaluating all of your partners holistically, to figure out what's working well and what isn't, maybe incorporating new partners. I'm sure for a lot of the people paying attention, I'm sure you get a lot of inquiries from a lot of different companies out there wanting to monetize your inventory. It does for you to assess the viability of each partner, but that can be a full-time job in and of itself. Just vetting partners.
Yeah, I think that, like, obviously we want to keep an eye on the bottom end first and foremost, but when selecting a partner, you kind of have to find the right balance in scale, right? Are you going to be able to get them on the phone and really cooperate with them and talk to them about your specific business, but are they also going to have the scale to have the attention of all the demand partners and technologies to have an effective conversation with them too? So there's sort of a balance there. You don't want them too big or too small, right? Like the Goldilocks size, right in the middle.
Just right. Thank you. That's awesome. Okay, I think we have done a pretty good job covering kind of the managed side of the business. Let's shift over to delegated. So what kind of a publisher is a good fit for delegation?
Good question. I think it can work well for a lot of different types of pubs. I think in our experience, what we see most commonly is a programmatic focused publisher. Someone who has a site that does decent traffic. Maybe they don't have the resources internally to manage their own inventory. They can't sell it. They can't keep up with the tech. They need that sort of AdOps expertise, especially in the programmatic space that they might not have in-house. So it seems to work well for those programmatic focused publishers because they can work with that delegated partner. That partner can manage the actual ad tag implementation, the tech upkeep, to Mike's point, managing all of the dozens of programmatic partners that it would take to effectively monetize that inventory. It takes a lot of the burden off of the publisher to get that stuff done and puts it on that delegated partner. So it certainly works well for programmatic publishers or programmatic focused publishers who might not have a lot of resources at their disposal.
Yeah, or just simply publishers that want to focus on what they do best, which is creating that content and growing their scale, right? So if they're not necessarily concerned with sort of owning all the technologies and creating a really bespoke offering, and like Travis said, if it's programmatic based sales, which is typically what the delegated style lends itself to, maybe that's the right approach.
Got it. So what are some of the need to knows if a publisher is considering going this route? Like, what are the things you can help call out to them before their pitfalls later?
Okay. Yeah, certainly the overall traffic numbers, the type of creative that you're going to be working with, I think will, may dictate which type of delegated partner you want to reach out to. Is it primarily display, video, audio, newsletters? There's certain better performers in certain spaces than others.
I
Yeah.
think also,
Go
I
ahead.
was going to say also, are you just starting out, or do you have
Yeah.
a program already in place? And if you do have that program already in place, how flexible is that delegated partner with accommodating whatever you have and insist, are critical to keeping, right? A lot of times with delegated partners, they'll have a very structured offering already, and it's the publisher's job to see how well that fits to them. If maybe you need a publisher partner that can be a little bit more flexible to what you may already have in place.
That makes sense. So when we talked a little bit about that and what you already have in place, so talk to me about, like, if I have a sales team, if they have a sales team, like, what are the different considerations there? Because you said earlier, Travis, like, if you can do your own sales, do it, right? You're generally going to get a higher CPM. That's the general rule of
Yeah.
thumb. But what if you've got a sales team, but you're interested in doing delegation? Do you just have to get somebody flexible? And what happens do they have a sales team ever?
Yeah, and I think oftentimes they do. And to your point, you are going to want a partner that's going to be flexible and allow for you to actually sell your own content. And I think most partners in that space likely would encourage that, just like I have. There's a caveat there that if you are out there selling your own campaigns, in most of those working scenarios, you won't be able to control, the operational end of that campaign. You need to hand that off to that delegated partner who will then traffic it and manage it in their ad server, their ad stack. So you don't have the exposure to it, but find a partner that's going to be flexible and willing to work with you in that capacity. I think first and foremost, and you're certainly going to want to talk through the revenue impacts of that and how it works. In most of the delegated situations, it's a rev share situation. Does that apply to your direct campaigns as well? You'll want to talk through a lot of the business end of that. But yeah, finding a partner, I think, that is willing to handle any type of sales that you may have yourself is a great first step. And then to your second question, are they also selling? I think a lot of partners are in a similar boat. They may not all have direct sale teams, but in working with so many different technology partners and so many different publishers, they will also likely come across deals. Even if they don't have that direct sales team that's actively pitching inventory, they're likely going to come across deals, and they'll reach out to you, or they should reach out to you and say, hey, I've got this advertiser, they're interested in your content. Do you mind if we schedule this ahead of whatever other campaigns might be in here, considering the CPMs or the brand recognition, whatever it might be?
Yeah. I mean, here in terms of the direct sales, like, you want that to be the exception, not necessarily the rule with delegated, I'd say largely. Obviously, we don't want to turn any business down, right? So you want to sell whatever you can, but if it's going to be at a volume that is consistent and scales high, you're going to want to be able to define some of that process and the management of it. Delegated partners are mainly focused on programmatic. Obviously, some of them have expertise with direct, but I think the way the technology is deployed allows better for programmatic focus than direct. But yeah, having the flexibility to be able to add one of those in from time to time is fantastic, and certainly adds more competition to the inventory.
Which is good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. If I'm new to this space, I might not know the answer to this question, which is, if I'm going this kind of delegated programmatic route, when do I get paid? Because I think I'm going to get paid in 30 days, but I don't think that's how that works.
Oh, it would be nice if
you
they
add a
were
little
all
color
I
paid
was
to
just
their
going to
days.
say, yeah, that sounds lovely.
For as quick as the auctions happen, actually resolving everything takes a bit more time there. I'm sure, Travis, you've worked on quite a few of these, but depending on the demand partners and sources of earnings you have in that stack, which is often numerous, over a dozen in most cases, it takes some time for that all to be processed. So it really depends on the partner. Hopefully it's in less than that 90. Sometimes it is. It really depends on the complexity and the scale of the stack. But once you establish that period of time, and hopefully it should be pretty regular from there on out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think especially for publishers new to the space, I do talk to a lot of new publishers, and they may anticipate that they're going to be paid net 30. And sometimes it scares them a little bit when I say it might be net 90, it might be net 120. You know, if that delegated partner needs those 90 days to collect from all of their programmatic partners and then they pay out 30 on top of that, new publishers might just want to keep that in mind. You know, it might help to have a little bit of runway to get you up to that point if you're just coming into the space. But if you're lucky and you're running maybe a fairly simple integration, it might be less than that 90, but I would say start with 90 as a baseline and maybe account for 120 just to be safe.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a very simple programmatic stack, it might shorten that period a bit, but as you add in more systems and partners, it tends to stretch out a bit. A bit more about like with delegated and direct sales, you know, another way that you might go about this, and maybe I'm getting ahead of ourselves and talking a little, describing the beginnings of more of a hybrid situation, but another way to sort of accommodate that is to maybe have some of your inventory dedicated to direct and some of it to programmatic. Maybe you have one ad unit on your page that is always sponsored by a partner. That's a great way to incorporate direct sales and do so without all the operational and technology burden, while the rest of it is handled mainly programmatically. But again, I can opine about this for hours. And again, I think I'm getting a little ahead of myself with sort of some examples of a hybrid approach.
Well, and I think that also gives the opportunity to keep things real tidy when it comes to who's doing what and, you know, where are the revenues and that sort of thing. Well, so let's wrap up delegated here a little bit. Are there other benefits that we haven't covered yet that we should hit on?
I would say, you know, I think we alluded to it earlier, you know, depending on your vertical and the performance of specific companies, you know, if you are a very sports focused publisher, there are ad networks out there that work incredibly well for sports inventory or live streaming inventory or entertainment industries. You know, finding that right partner, I think is going to be a key consideration. Yeah, and resources for sure. I think those are the two my big takeaways, you know, from the delegation, you know, consideration.
Yeah, let a partner keep on top of everything that's happening and be accountable for all the updates and changes and problems and things like that, and focus on, like I said earlier, focus on creating your content and cash and checks.
We like cash and checks. All right, that's a great place to stop that or to end that section. So let's get into the hybrid just a little bit, because I do think there's really kind of these two boats, but Mike, you already alluded to the fact that in some cases it makes sense to do both. Can you give a few examples of that?
Yeah, I work with several publishers that do a hybrid approach. It's fairly unique, but you know, a few examples. One publisher is sort of a global news organization. They have many different publications through mergers and acquisitions over the years. I think in upwards of dozens of different publications. They're US based and they have a US based sales team, and they do really well in that market. But some of these titles that they're acquiring are in Europe and Asia and have existing, you know, sort of operations and sales efforts and things like that. So what they've done is that they do a managed approach for their domestic traffic and domestic sites, and some of their European and other international sites. They do a delegated approach and allow and delegate that inventory to maybe a local existing sales team that does really well with the local advertisers. And so that has performed really well for them, you know, doing much more in those international markets than maybe US advertisers would be interested in. So that's one way. I think another way is in with some publishers that we have that are focused on some very high value inventory, you know, specifically CTV, live streaming, things like that. That takes a lot of resources and attention. Oftentimes they're around live events, which create even, you know, more need for resources, things like that. That's their number one revenue driver. And of course, they're going to dedicate all of the resources they have to that. While that's happening, they also have quite a bit of display inventory. And so maybe that's more straightforward. They don't need to be as hands-on. And so like we were saying earlier, different types of inventory has different value and focus. They focus on the high value stuff, and on the very straightforward basic inventory, maybe they turn that over to a delegated partner. Or again, someone local that can sell more locally to some of their smaller sort of ancillary sites. So those are two of like the main examples, but you know, the list goes on with how you can slice and dice. Maybe you have a separate technology that has one particular ad unit across all pages on your site. That's delegated because they have a specific niche with demand, whereas all the other ones are yours or are part of sponsorships with brands that you've been working with for many, many years, etc.
All right. Travis, anything to add before we I
think
think
he
we're
covered
wrapping
it.
up our fireside.
Yeah, I think that really covered it, Mike. Well done.
Great. So let's switch over. We've got a few questions to answer here. So Craig, do you want to come join us back on stage? No coughing, please. Although now he's guaranteed to cough because I said that. So so Rob, because he is floating around in the background, can't use the Q&A. So I'm going to hit this one first. Am I correct that understanding someone like OAO is in a unique spot because vendors want you to help them get in front of a bunch of publishers, and you're in a position to see how these vendors do across multiple environments? Any thoughts about how you evaluate vendors with that lens?
Yes. We do get a lot of inquiries from vendors, because like Mike said, we work with 100+ pubs. So, those vendors know that we've got the reach to a lot of those pubs. We put sort of our 20+ years of AdOps expertise into vetting these publishers and whether or not it is going to work well for all of those publishers. They certainly all the vendors want to reach all of the publishers. That's not always the case. It's really going to come down to specifically each publisher's approach, whether or not they're managing it themselves or they're delegating it, or if they're using us in that management or delegation. So we certainly do a lot of vetting of a lot of vendors. I've probably spoken to hundreds, if not thousands, of vendors over the years. So there's certainly a lot of different points that we run through as we vet these partners. And I'd like to think that we do bring a lot of the creme de la creme, so to speak, of that vendor pool to a lot of our client base.
Yeah, and I think something that we mentioned earlier too is that in terms of looking at partners, because we represent so many publishers and so much inventory, we tend to have a bit louder of a voice with some of the partners, get a bit more attention from them, right? Whereas, if we were running maybe 10 million impressions a month, we'd get a certain amount of attention from technology and demand partners. If we're running 500 million impressions, you get a certain amount more. When we look at our relationships and sort of view it as sum of all of them, as a lot of the partners do, we tend to have a more regular conversation and get quicker, more agile sort of support and service from them.
But we also regularly vet the vendors. So as we have them and we're working with them, they might work well for a while and then not as much. So we kind of phase them out a little bit. But we've got our steady eddies that have been with us for years. And then we have other ones that transition in and out depending upon quality of service, viability of the technology, etc. So we're always monitoring it, making sure that we're continuing to get the best ones out there for our partners, our publishers. And as Travis said, he's probably spoken with dozens, hundreds, thousands, whatever over the years of these guys. And we've got a good roster now, and we're always looking to add more to make sure we're giving everything that we need to the publishers.
Yeah, I mean, it's great, right? You get to run them a little bit more through their paces than a publisher would in whatever limited aspect they use.
Also,
let's get to it.
No one wants to go through legal, right? With all these, we all have the same experience there, right? It's like 3 to 6 months to do what we think should be 2 or 3 days, right? If we can avoid legal review for publishers, then even better.
Yeah, usually our contracts, when we add in vendors like that, if it doesn't warrant or need a requirement, is that a new exhibit to get added to the agreement, it's usually encompassed within like a broader monetization of programmatic kind of terms that we already have in place with them. So when it's that kind of offering, when it's something
instead of signing 24 contracts, you can sign one. Yeah.
Right, because you guys do reselling and all that management and that sort of
thing. So
thing.
many different services. Yeah.
All right, I've got another one for you. This one was asked a little earlier on. So how do you measure ROI? What metrics are important to evaluate when you decide to delegate?
I mean, I would say that the biggest metric is probably the actual revenue return. I think that's what most publishers are going to be focused on. But I guess it also depends on that publisher's specific focus. We certainly work with very large pubs who have a very strong direct sales presence, and they delegate some of the, to Mike's earlier point, some of the less valuable inventory maybe to another partner, and they may not be as concerned with the overall numbers as the consistency in the fill and the advertisers that they're seeing come through there, and the reliability, of that tech partner. So I would say it definitely depends on the specific publisher, but more often than not, I think at the end of the day, the revenue is going to be the biggest, key contributor.
Yeah, it's the absolute revenue, and second only to like ECPM, right? Like, what are you getting per unit of inventory? Those are the most basic, right? And you can get more detailed from there depending on the publisher and the offering.
Right. And actually, when you're evaluating partners like that, whether it's us or other companies, whoever it is, it's important to understand how to, how to best get a proper view into what ROI will be when figuring out which one to work with. Because maybe one guy's going to say, I'm going to take two partners, put them up and A/B test them on different days, on different areas of the site, different inventory. So, I mean, this is a much longer conversation, but there's a lot of ways to structure tests in order to make sure that you're really getting a good view into what that ROI would wind up being, what that performance, better said, would wind up being with each partner that you might decide to work with. And it's going to vary based on publisher, platform you work with. Is it display? Is it video? Is it CTV? Is it audio? Whatever it winds up being, there's a lot of ways to look at it. So it's a bigger discussion when you dive in on something like that. Really, you need to get into it kind of thing.
Got it. Oh, it depends sometimes, right? Like our industry is known for that. Okay, got another one for you. What sort of scale, revenue, traffic, etc., thresholds are the obvious times for transitioning, right? So going from AdSense to fully dedicated, maybe then to outsource to then managing it in-house in a fully managed way.
I was going to say, I hate to call back to what you literally just said. You said it depends so much in this industry. I think it would depend on the content, and the value of that content. I think in my mind, I've got some rough ideas. If we're talking about millions of impressions, I think AdSense is a great place to start. Once you get into tens of millions, maybe move into AdX monetization, dozens of millions, move into AdX and OB, maybe some pre-bid, hundreds of millions. Certainly you're going to want to get into, some of the more advanced wrapping solutions that are out there. Those are just some sort of off the cuff ballparks, I would say. But again, depending on the content and the types of ads, obviously I'm in my mind, I think I generally go to display first. But if you're talking just video, the numbers would be a little bit lower because video revenue is obviously much higher. But yeah, it would certainly depend on the publisher, I think.
You're right on, Travis. I think of it in scales of 10, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, etc. Roughly though, because the volume is the starting point, but then like Travis said, you really have to qualify the value of each unit and what the opportunity, what the potential is. Is it going to be able to support all the resources required and still be profitable for that publisher and allow them to focus on their main thing there. So yeah, I agree with you, Travis. I was like, is he going to say tens of millions for like a medium size AdX, maybe a little pre-bid?
Yeah.
And I'm glad you.
That's generally where I'm thinking.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the point about, when you think about it holistically, like the revenue from that has to support the resources that you have internally. That was a point I was hoping to mention a little sooner. But yeah, thinking about this, like how much revenue can that inventory generate at that scale? Can you afford to, manage all this stuff directly, or do you need to delegate it?
Right.
Beyond that, there's also the functionality. So you're looking at volume when it comes to revenue, and that's that ballpark is kind of thing, or the general landscape of what you're looking for. But if you're a publisher and you're getting a lot of inquiries from advertisers for programmatic direct deals, only certain types of platforms can handle that. So you're going to want to understand, okay, this is my volume, this is what I'm going to be getting based on general open auction or general deals that are coming through. But if companies are contacting me for programmatic direct, if I need to be able to handle that, I need to be able to support that. What platforms do I need to be implementing? Maybe moving into that range sooner than later. versus just general volume based.
Yeah, that's a great call out about some of those tool thresholds. We've got time and we have one last question. So let's hit that one before we wrap up. What should a publisher expect in meeting advertiser they want to work with? Outside of metrics, what are the key factors to keep in mind outside of knowing your own strategy? So sorry, I guess those were kind of two. So what should a publisher expect in meeting advertisers they want to work with? I don't.
I'm not exactly certain where this is going, but the first thing that
Yeah.
occurred to me was like, hey, brand alignment. What type of content do they want their brand to be aligned with? What pieces of inventory is a good fit for them, and then obviously also ad products. What type of creative do they want to deliver, and can you support that? Is it part of an existing or a flexible sales package, right? So, if it's a simple display, that's pretty easy for almost any publisher. If it's something a little bit more complicated, part of a package, etc. Newsletters, video, all these types of things. Those are the two things that come to mind. I'm not sure if that's exactly where the question was going, though.
I think you're spot on. And then calling back to some of our earlier points, an advertiser may want to run a very targeted campaign with you, and maybe your ad stack can't accommodate that. Maybe your tech and taxonomy or the tech that your ad server supports, whatever it might be. You want to be sure that you can accommodate what that advertiser is asking for, so you can take their money and get that deal done.
Right.
All right.
Be sure that you can, or that we can, develop that,
or that we can get you to that place. Yeah,
Right.
Exactly.
Right. When you go
you
in to
answered
meet
the
with the
question they were
advertiser,
asking.
Oh, great.
when you go in to meet with the advertising agency, all of that is very important, and understanding what their goals are, having the ability to deploy it, like what Mike was saying, and hitting all the different products and offerings, and then understanding what their actual delivery goals and metrics are that they're looking for, so you can craft your traditional terms insertion order to be able to cater to what their needs are. So understand what their delivery goals are, their KPIs, et cetera, and then build it out from there with all the technology and ad offerings that you can bring to the table.
So, Essie, we're actually going to give you a way to contact OAO or come through me for the second half of that question, because we do have to wrap it up now. So I feel like we've covered a lot of ground here. I learned some things. I also got some things that I realized, yep, that's still how things kind of work as I'm over here doing community stuff. It's a complicated business, and between, privacy and all that kind of stuff, I feel like it's gotten even more complicated. So I want to ask you guys one final question, and we have 5 minutes. So 1 minute each, please. Is, what is a top question that your clients have been asking you recently? With that,
that's a good one.
Travis?
I guess I can start, as the outward facing sales guy, I certainly get asked a lot of questions. I guess it's a toss up between what is the most common. I'll jump into one. I'm sure Mike will probably address the other. Certainly technology reselling, OAO is part of the GCPP. And so we do actually sell a lot of ad service, a lot of AM360 networks, and the varying support services that come along with that, one primarily being AdX as well. So we do get a lot of inquiries and a lot of referrals even, from other tech partners about actually ad server, selling and supplying. That's certainly probably one of the bigger asks. It's a toss up though. Again, I'm sure Mike will probably jump in on a couple of points here.
Yeah. No, I'd say that's right on. Access to Google's, ad server and ad exchange is probably one of the most popular, especially like Travis said, from a new to us publisher. For some of the existing publishers, I think they come to us more with consulting and technical questions, ongoing services. So, whether it's advising about privacy or consent or cookies or, audience, or even full scale projects with like what we talked about earlier, taxonomies and things. I tend to work with our existing publishers on a lot more of those types of things after their foundation has been set. And then beyond that, other technologies like we talked about earlier that kind of complement your foundational ad server, right? Whether it's an email ad server add-on that can help you deliver ads there, or, contextualization tools or self-serve, like Travis mentioned. I tend to
Programmatic.
yeah, and then
Right.
programmatic
That
all day
too.
long, right?
Yeah, all day long.
But yeah, Travis will probably talk more about some of the more foundational offerings, and then I'll work with publishers to sort of refine that and fill in any gaps along the way over the course of many, many years, hopefully.
Makes sense. Craig,
I'll go from a more
bring us home.
general standpoint. Yeah, I'll go from a more general standpoint. So, aside from the typical reasons why you'd reach out to an outside provider focused on what we do, extra capacity or there's general trafficking services or monetization services, technology we're selling, et cetera. Consulting, guidance, and leadership is something that happens not necessarily right away, but when you've been in business as long as we have, I guess it happens a lot. We continue to get more and more of these kind of requests over the years, but we all know the industry is complex. It's expanding and changing every day. It's a lot for a small to mid-sized company, or even some of the seasoned publishers out there to work with or wrap their heads around. So as a professional services firm, part of our job is to stay on top of everything so we can offer the advice and the guidance that is needed for publishers. Goes hand in hand with our offering, as or we are a white glove service company. So offering that white glove level of service to our clients means providing them not just with the service, but adding in that advising, leadership, and consulting service. And actually, nice little hook into what we just did together. We published a piece with Beeler.Tech earlier this month. It talks about the 2025 initiatives for publishers. And it talks about we took it from a fantasy football kind of theme, where we talk about fantasy football, what players do you start, what do you sit, so startums and situms. So we looked at the initiatives publishers should be prioritizing for the first half of the year. Those are your startums, and the situms are the ones that you don't necessarily need to jump on right away, but you should keep your eye on. So we just did that. So that's even more of I guess that advice and guidance that we're kind of working with Beeler.Tech on to offer the entire industry and the Beeler.Tech community and the community at large. So with that, I know I went over by a minute there, but I wasn't coughing, so I was really happy about that.
That's all right.
Thank you.
All right, I have one more for you. If somebody wants to
Oh.
reach out to you guys, how do they get a hold of you?
Go to our
Easiest way,
website.
sales at yeah.
Go to
Yes,
our
go to the
website.
One of
website.
you.
Contact us. Yeah, AdOps.com is the website.
It's all right
You can
there.
contact us.
You can reach out to sales@AdOps.com if you want to send us an email. That goes to the three of us. You'll likely hear from me. I'll reach back out to you. If you have questions about anything we talked about, or even if you just want to talk shop, certainly reach out. Can't hurt to meet new people in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to take a quick second to say, this was my first fireside webinar through Zoom, and I hadn't been paying attention to chat. Lots of familiar faces. Thank you, everyone, for the kind words. Looking forward to talking with you all soon.
Yep.
Yeah,
Thank
this
you.
is terrific.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thanks you
Thanks
to
to
the
everybody. You
gentlemen
guys are
for
great.
Thank you.
sharing all their knowledge. It was a great session. Thanks for hanging out with us for an hour today.